In this video, I'm going to show you how to cut paper down for a recycled paper book. So you can see in front of me, I have a bunch of different types of paper. I'm specifically going to be preparing for a stab stitch bound book. This particular style of binding only needs pieces of paper for the text block or for the interior, even though it doesn't have text in it, that are the size of the exterior. A lot of other binding styles you'll see require twice this size because they're folded. This one, if you can see here, is just single sheets. So this is a great option if you are doing something where you don't have very large paper available. This is a great style. But I have all of these different types of papers and they're all different sizes, which means I need to cut something down to size. So here I have a couple pictures I'm going to cut some parts out of. This one's kind of dinged up on the edges, so I'm going to make sure to remove that. I've got a couple of fronts of greeting cards that I've saved over the years. I've got some fancy paper that I've just got kind of laying around my stash. I also have some just plain white paper. This is Mohawk paper, but you could use printer paper, notebook paper, sketchbook paper. And then at some point, maybe not on this video because the tripod makes it unwieldy, but I might also take this brown paper bag and cut it down. But all of the same principles still apply. So I'm just going to show a couple examples with smaller things because it'll be easier to see on the camera. So I have this really pretty embossed front of a greeting card. I know that I don't want this rough edge where I just ripped off the front of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a cutting mat, or it can be the back of a sketchbook or just even cardboard, something to protect my table, and a ruler, as well as a blade of some sort. So here I have an X-Acto knife. I like to keep mine in a cork so that it doesn't stab me unawares. And then I'm going to try really, really hard to make sure that this stays at right angles. So one of the beauties of a cutting mat is that you can, if you know that something is square already, you can line it up with edges, right? So I've lined it up on the grid. I'm going to put my ruler across the area I want to protect. I'm going to carefully line my ruler up with another portion of the grid, and then I'm going to use my blade. I'm not going to apply too much pressure. It's just kind of the pressure that the blade makes available. I'm coming in a little bit close to my tripod, so it's looking awkward. You might have to go over this a couple times to cut all the way through. So close. And then I'm going to scoot this out because I simply can't work that close into my tripod. If I come in under it, there we go. I'm just going to trim that little tail off. So now I have a very nice finished edge piece of paper. Or I guess card stock. But then I also have the problem of deciding what dimension I want for my book. I actually think that this might be nice. I'm not sure. This one's a little bit larger, but that might be nice too. I really wanted to use this image. I wanted to use this kind of pathway through the palmettos. So I might actually start with this. And so please don't be too offended. I'm going to cut my dog Rocco out of the picture. Don't worry, I'll use that picture for something else later. So I'm going to start by doing this. Again, line it up on the grid. And then I'm going to line this up as best I can. I'm trying not to knock my tripod over. And then again, I'm just going to cut along the edge of my ruler. Almost through. There we go. So it's a very sweet picture. It's just not going to come into my book. So now I have probably what is going to be the smallest image I want in my book. So I can take a look, see if I want to cut something down to this size, but realistically, I don't know that I want to cut anything down to be this small, because if we think about this with the example in mind, I'm going to lose at least, half an inch to my binding, which means that my image is going to get smaller. Right? So I think what I'm actually going to do is collage this maybe onto the back of this, so I can use this area at some point, but then I still have this really cool embossed image I wanted to include anyway. So if I lose this area to the spine, right, that's okay. You can still see my whole picture. So I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to glue this together at some other point. But I'm going to guess that you know how to glue things together, so I'm not going to demonstrate that here. Let's say I have something, let's say I have this piece of paper. You can see this is not square. This is actually a doubled over sheet of paper. It's a little bit wider on this side than it is on this side. It also has this deckled edge, which shows me that it's handmade, which is really cool. But it's not even, which, if I spend so much time putting together a carefully crafted book, is gonna drive me nuts. So I'm gonna take a look at what I've kind of previously decided is going to be the outer dimension of my book, which is this. You guys can see even this is a little bit wider than this. I'll probably end up coming back and cutting this down, but I really want to make this square first. As you can see, there's a lot of trial and error, and it's just going to be a lot of kind of critically thinking about what size you want your book to be, if you want something to stick out on top, how you want to layer things and put things together. But regardless of what you want to do, these types of rules still apply. I know that I want this to be doubled over. I don't really want to see this other side, although I don't know, it's kind of cool, but I like this shiny gold ink. So I'm going to leave this folded over and cut it into a rectangle this way. So the first step is that I have to decide, when making this a rectangle, I have to decide what side is going to be my reference point. For this demonstration, I'm going to use this fold, and I'm going to understand that this is the only straight side at the time, or currently. And actually, it looks a little bit more crooked on this side, so I'll cut from here. I'm going to use this as my reference point and cut everything to right angles from this. So if I line this up on my cutting mat, I am only going to worry about this top edge for my first cut. So I'm going to pull this up a little bit. You can see if you follow this grid line, right, this edge goes all the way into the next grid line, right? It's almost 1/4 of an inch crooked. Over here, you can see that even this gets a little bit out of whack as well. If I tried to cut from this edge, everything would be askew this way. Ditto over here, it would all be crooked. So I need to use one edge and cut from there. So I'm gonna make sure this is lined up to only the top edge, and then I'm gonna use my ruler and cut this evenly. Now, you don't necessarily have to line up with a grid line. If you're really good at kind of sight work, I guess, and I've had a lot of practice, so I'm gonna use my eye here. I know that this distance here is roughly the same as the distance here, which means that this, and you can even check this with your eye too, this is a 90-degree right angle. So if I cut this here, which I'm going to, I will end up with a right angle corner. Now, the great thing about this is that I know that my folded edge and this edge I just cut are at right angles. So I can come in, line this up really carefully, and I'm going to cut this other edge. I'm going to make sure I don't want to see the decal on this, so I'm actually going to cut all of it off. That's a little generous. I'm going to scoot it in a little bit. So now this is square, and then down here, right, it's becoming rapidly more apparent that this is not at a right angle. So as long as I know that my folded edge is square, this first one that I cut is square, and then I could use this as a square as well, but I actually kind of want to stick with this first edge as much as possible because there's always the chance for error. I'll come in and I'm going to trim this last bit as well. So remember, I'm using this as my guide because this is what I already determined is my reference point. And now I have a lovely rectangle of paper. You can use this same trick for any size of paper. This paper bag that I'm not going to cut on camera because it's a little bit too big and unwieldy to deal with my tripod. I would do the same thing. I could cut a single sheet out of this. I just need to make sure that I have one edge that I'm using as my straight edge reference point. I could actually come in and probably cut multiples out here all at once. It might make an appearance later, but the same sort of technique still applies. Now, if you don't have a cutting board or cutting mat like this, you can use the back of a sketchbook. You can mark a grid on the back of a sketchbook, just use a ruler, and that'll help you enormously. If you have a T-square works great. I don't have a T-square. There are a lot of different ways that you can get the job done with this. This is probably the easiest setup, but it's definitely not the only one. So now at this point, I'm going to go back through and I'm going to kind of keep working with what I've already determined I want to put in my book, kind of play around with the arrangement of things a little bit. But I'm not going to necessarily show you guys all that on video because it'll take a very long time. But after this, I'll show you how to bind everything together.